Hey guys, in today's video I am comparing a $1,000 Zeiss lens to a lens that is 1/3 of the price. That's $350 made by Rokinon. And they are very similar in size, both fast primes, and the focal length is very close as well. So let's take a closer look at both of these lenses. So I just purchased this Zeiss lens recently. This is what it looks like. It is very well built, has a nice and smooth focus ring, autofocus, all of your fancy connections, no optical stabilization, but it is a solid lens all around, nice and compact, and it looks great. This is the Rokinon that I reviewed a couple of videos ago. This is the Rokinon 21mm F1.4. So the Zeiss is a 24, the Rokinon is a 21, so the Rokinon is slightly wider, and it is also faster at 1.4 versus the 1.8 on the Zeiss. As you can tell, size-wise, the Rokinon is just a few millimeters longer. The Zeiss is slightly less weight. The Rokinon feels like it weighs a little bit more, but it is a manual lens, so no autofocus, no optical stabilization here. Here is the Zeiss mounted on my A6000, and here is the Rokinon lens. You get that nice orange reddish ring around it, similar to Canon L lenses. So I went out and took some sample photos side by side with both of these lenses on my A6000. I used a tripod, shutter delay, all of that fun stuff. All of these images are shot in RAW, and about half the shots actually manually focused with the Zeiss just to make it a little bit more fair. So let's take a look at the results. All right, I'm gonna start out with this picture of my wife sitting here, and I'm gonna keep all of the 24mm Zeiss lenses on the left and all of the Rokinon images on the right. So just looking at this picture, both of these are done at f2 or f2.2, ISO 100. If you were to compare them side by side, obviously the focal length is a little bit different, as is the pose, but there's not a huge difference between the two. So let's zoom in and see if we can find much of a difference here. There's a difference in bokeh. For some reason, the Rokinon lens is creamier. If we look at subject sharpness, it looks like the Rokinon is sharper or better focused, and you can see more of that detail. This next shot is done at f8, ISO 100, stop down on both lenses. And you can see immediately that there's a difference in colors. That's one of the biggest things that I saw between these two lenses. The Zeiss has its own set of colors, and then the Rokinon has another set of colors. Neither one is better, in my opinion, than the other. They're just different. So let's take a look at center sharpness here. So in my eyes, a little bit warmer here with the Rokinon. It looks a little more detailed. You can see a bit more detail right here as you compare that to the Zeiss. The water obviously looks a little different as well. Let's take a look at this side. So here it's pretty similar. Up here, very, very close. I'd still say that the Rokinon looks slightly better. If you look at that sign, you can tell it's a little better here, and slightly warmer colors. Here's a portrait shot of my wife, and you could tell right away not only the focal distance difference, but the color difference. The Rokinon looks significantly brighter. Now both of these are shot at f1.8, 1/400th of a second. So it looks like the Rokinon is letting in more light. If you compare it side by side, you can see there's quite a bit of difference there. But let's take a look at sharpness on the eyes. Very close. The Zeiss looks very good. Skin tones are nice. The Rokinon looks a little bit more washed out and maybe slightly less sharp Not by much though. It has a nicer, creamier bokeh going out to the hair. Let's see if there's a difference in detail here. See, the Rokinon has some nicer detail with the hair here. So, quite interesting. Yeah, hair looks better here. But both images, if you're not pixel peeping, which most people are not going to be doing anyway, the Rokinon is a very nice, pleasing image. Next shot is done at f5, so slightly stopped down. Let's see if there's a difference here if we focus on this house. Okay, so Zeiss is definitely not as sharp as the Rokinon in this example. Let's take a look at my wife. And same story here. Rokinon looks noticeably sharper. The thing that I've noticed about this picture is if you take a look at the colors, here's the Zeiss and here's the Rokinon. Here's the Zeiss and the Rokinon. Rokinon, in my opinion, looks a little nicer as far as colors. This next shot is also done stop down at f5.6 on both lenses. This is just brown sunset overlooking the Oasis, if you guys are familiar with the Austin area. So some fringing here with the Rokinon. I noticed a little bit more chromatic aberration. However, it looks like the barrel distortion is slightly worse with the Zeiss, at least raw. In this case, the Zeiss looks better. Looks a little more clear. For some reason, it's not looking too great with the Rokinon, which may have been my poor focusing, but that's what you get with a manual focus lens. Not every shot is going to be perfect. In this case, the Zeiss definitely outperformed the Rokinon. The colors are pretty similar in both cases. The sky is a little more purple here and a little more blue with the Zeiss. So this next one has a lot of detail, f8 on both. ISO is now being cranked up just because it's so dark outside. But I wanted to see which one of these lenses was better at more detailed shots. Zeiss looks great. Rokinon isn't far behind though. It's pretty close here. Let's see. Here the Rokinon in fact looks a little better to me. Yeah. Look at the railing. It's kind of a mixed result here. Both images look decent, but when you start looking at the details, the Zeiss is great and the Rokinon is just as good in this case across the frame. So this shot is now done at f4. Shutter speed is very slow. I'm using a tripod, but that doesn't mean that these are perfect examples of what you get. Let's take a look at detail here. So looking at these houses, in this case, the Rokinon looks sharper to me. As I move out, definitely sharper here. And looking out here, noticeably sharper in the distance as well. You can tell this home here, a little bit soft with the Zeiss. So pretty interesting result here. It's also interestingly sharper when it comes to this railing that's very close by and these buildings out here. And this is one of the shots that I manually focused. So I was using manual focus to focus on this house right here. And you can tell that the Zeiss is missed it a little bit. Definitely not as sharp as the Rokinon. Here is a low light shot. So I did these wide open on both lenses. I just put the camera in aperture priority just because I'm sure one or two of you will be curious as to which one is better in low light. This is the shot you get from the Zeiss, and here is the shot you get from the Rokinon. So you can see the Zeiss has slightly better corners, or I should say less vignetting. As I switch over to the Rokinon, there's a bit of vignetting in the corners, but the Rokinon does let in more light. So there is a difference there. And the last image here that I will be comparing is done at f2.8, also low light, ISO 2000 on both lenses. And these were both manually focused on this sheet of paper, so we're going to zoom in and see which text is more clear. You zoom into the center. And they're very similar. Hard to tell much of a difference. If I had to choose between the two of them, I'd say that the Rokinon looks a little bit sharper. One thing that I do appreciate about the Rokinon lens is, I said it when I did the review video, it has a very flat, sharp focal plane. So unlike other cheaper lenses where you go into the corners and it starts falling apart, the Rokinon is pretty sharp throughout, and it maintains that sharpness in the corners and in the edges. So if I zoom in to this edge here, you can see that the Rokinon is sharp. The Zeiss is decently sharp as well, but that Rokinon is astoundingly sharp on the edges of these photos. If you look at these lines at the bottom here, the barrel distortion seems to be more of an issue with the Zeiss, especially when you're shooting RAW. Obviously the camera corrects it when you're shooting JPEGs, but you do notice that there is some barrel distortion here with this image here as you compare it to the slightly more flat image produced by the Rokinon. So I said this before in the overview video, the Zeiss lens is great. It does everything well. The only problem I have with it is the price tag. It's huge. The Rokinon really surprised me in this comparison. I was expecting this to be pretty equal across most of the side-by-side shots, and for the most part they were, but there were a couple of situations in which the Rokinon was clearly the better, sharper lens. Both of these lenses are excellently built. One is made in Japan, the other is made in Korea. Both are very usable focal lengths. The 24mm versus 21mm debate, there's really not much to it. One's a little bit wider, but it's not a huge deal. What was really surprising to me is the color difference between both of these lenses. The Zeiss is amazing, as you would expect, but the Rokinon really surprised me. In some situations, I thought it was better. If you are planning on shooting video, the Zeiss obviously has autofocus. It works well with the Sony bodies, like a6000, a6500, etc. So this lens will make shooting videos a lot easier. And really, if you're just running around and snapping a ton of pictures and you don't want to sit there and manually focus on a subject, this is the easier lens to deal with. The Rokinon is the better lens if you're just looking for something that's inexpensive, that you could stick on your camera, that you can take your time to frame and get everything dialed in and focused. And the result is very sharp images on par with the Zeiss, and in some situations even superior than the Zeiss. What's funny is I kind of predicted this would happen back a couple of months ago when I purchased this Rokinon lens. After I played around with it for a little bit, I saw that it was sharp. I saw that it was a really good contender. And this is the lens that really inspired me to go out and purchase the Zeiss in the first place. So both of these lenses are great primes. If you're looking for an excellent prime lens, check out both of them. The Zeiss is $1,000. I would not recommend paying $1,000 for it unless you absolutely want a brand new copy of it. Used, these lenses will go for about $600 to $650, and at that point it makes a whole lot more sense to pick one of these up. If you are on a tighter budget and you are okay with manual focus and you're looking for something that's better in low light and very sharp across the frame, then a brand new Rokinon 21mm is still going to be about half the price of a used Zeiss. So let me know down in the comments what you guys thought of this comparison, what your thoughts are on each of these lenses. As always, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for all of your likes, comments, and support, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.